Hey guys, Frank here and welcome in our studio in Emmeloord. Today, part 2 of the Geekoto review. Now in the first part I already showed you how we used it on location with our model Claudia, and I was already impressed by these little powerhouses. They're small strobes, they give you a lot of light output. Now first of all, before we start this video, I want to make one thing 100% clear. Now, these are totally different strobes than you would expect in a studio. For example, in our studio we use the Hansel system. Now, it doesn't say that these strobes are better than the Hansel system or the Hansel system is better than these strobes. They're two completely different market areas. Like for example, the Hansel strobes, they are very robustly built. They work on normal power. They give you a lot of power, but also, of course, they have modeling lights. You can use them proportional, you can use them on full power, and they emit a lot of light. So in a dark studio with the Hansel strobes, you have great lighting to work with. Now, when you look at strobes like these, well, they have a few advantages and a few disadvantages. The first one, of course, is they're really small. They pack a lot of punch for outside, but also for in the studio. Like for example, this one is 200 watts, this one is 250 watts, and they even have a 400 watt unit. And you never know what will come in the future, right? So what is the difference between those systems? The Hansel system, already mentioned, has that modeling light, and that's a big plus in the studio. But they also have a little bit more freezing action. That means if a model jumps, you can really freeze them very easily with the Hansel system because they have a fast flash duration. Now to freeze motion, the flash duration is very important. It has to be anywhere between, let's say, 0.02 of a second and up. You can get away with like a 1,000th of a second, but you have to time it very carefully. And when you just have a model that flips her hair, you're fine with 1,000th of a second. But when you want to do a jumping model, you really need that 1/2000th of a second. So in this video, we're going to do exactly that. We're going to test the flash duration, the power stability, and of course the color stability. But first, those differences. So the Hansel strobes are a little bit bigger, they run on normal power, and they have that modeling light. The limitation is, of course, they run on normal power, so you can't bring them easily outside, and they are limited to 1/125th of a second, the so-called X-sync time. That means in the studio that you have no problem at all. They really feel at home in the studio, and I would highly recommend people with a big studio to use those kinds of strobes. But now the other market. There are a lot of people out there that like photography as a hobby, that like to shoot some images in their living room or maybe in a small studio, but they also want kit that can go outside. Now, the big limitations of normal strobes outside is that you're stuck with that 125th of a second, maybe 160 or 1/200, but you're stuck with that X-sync. Now, the thing that you need to break that X-sync is something called high-speed sync. Now, with high-speed sync, you don't have one pulse, but you actually have several pulses next to each other that makes it possible to shoot on insanely high shutter speeds. The disadvantages is, of course, that it drains your battery much faster, but it also recycles a lot slower, and you take a humongous amount of power. So, yeah, with no high-speed sync, you can probably get f16. With high-speed sync, it drops a lot lower. So that's why with speedlights, when we use high-speed sync, we always combine 1 or 2 speedlights together. So one package, 2 speedlights or maybe 4, and then you can easily kill the sun. But a normal speedlight is about maybe 45 to 75 watts. These babies are 200, 250 and 400 watts. So that means that now you don't need 2 speedlights to kill the sun, but you only need 1. But there's more. Because they run on batteries, you can use them inside in the studio, but you can also use them outside. Now, the battery life is of course really important. And that's one of the things that I hate about speedlights. After about 50 or 60 shots on full power, you already notice that they will go down in speed. It's recycling slower, you have to wait for the beep, and that's terrible. These kinds of batteries run for about 500 shots. We didn't test it, but let's say 400. That's more than enough, right? Now, of course, you need a display. Well, they have a nice display on the back. And of course, you need a remote control. Now, with normal studio strobes, a dumb control is more than enough because you're shooting on manual, right? But with these kinds of strobes, you also have something else. Besides HSS, high-speed sync, you also have an option called ETTL, metering through the lens. This is awesome if you are moving around fast, for example, for an event. You don't have time to meter the light. The only thing you have to do is take the shot and it has to be there. And then ETTL helps a lot. You can compare it a little bit with shooting your camera on S mode or AV mode, shutter priority or aperture priority, where the camera just figures out the exposure and just gives you something that's in the ballpark and that you can easily correct. Compare ETTL to something like this. And of course you can play with it with exposure compensation and make it a little bit more day to night, but in essence ETTL is more like the auto setting and manual where you use a light meter. So its size, of course, that's nice. It's the battery. It's that HSS and ETTL. So you need a different remote, right? Now, the nice thing is Geekoto, of course, also delivers a nice remote. You have 4 groups, you have different channels. You can set up everything from ETTL to manual. You can change all the settings. And of course, you can also use zoom if the strobe, of course, supports it. And you can turn on the modeling lights. But hey, there's more. Now here you guys going like, Frank, pricing, like a Hensel system is, well, you get what you pay for. Let's talk it like that. But sometimes you don't need to spend a lot of money to still get a very decent setup. Now in the past, the choice was studio strobes or speedlights. And speedlights, in all honesty, are underpowered. They're nice, often they don't have modeling lights and, well, they're just very limiting. This, I think, is the perfect hybrid between those studio strobes and speedlights. They're way more powerful and advanced than a speedlight, but they're a lot less powerful than a studio strobe. But you can do your studio work also with these kinds of strobes. Okay, a few things about the Geekotos. Now, in my hand I have the gt200. Now this looks a little bit like a speedlight. You can zoom with it, it has that Fresnel in the front, and of course it's fully compatible with our Rogue magnetic system. So you just use the speedlight adapter and you can mount any magnetic device that you want, for example our amazing snoot, or our dome, or our grids, or our gels. Everything fits on it via the, where is it? Via the speedlight adapter. Now, this is the other one. This is the gt250. Now, the gt250 is based on the round strobe principle. It's already magnetic, so that means that you don't need this one, but you can just use our magnetic system straight on the strobe. Now, you might wonder like, hey, so if I buy the strobes, do I need to also buy the Rogue magnetic system? Yes, of course. But no. In the package from the gt250 and the gt200 you already have a magnetic system. It's hard plastic, it's a little bit different from the Rogue system, but it works like a charm. So it's up to you. If you want a little bit more advanced and easier stuff, you get the Rogue system because it's collapsible and it just extends and it's just a little bit better designed. If you say, hey, I want to start out, they are very complete. You can start out immediately, take them out of the box, charge the battery. Battery charger, of course, is included, and you can start working with their magnetic system. If you want to upgrade later, just go for the Rogue system or whatever you like. Okay, so up to the tests. The first test we're going to do is, of course, the flash duration. I want to make sure that I have strobes that can freeze motion and that aren't really slow. Now, when you look at the specifications of Geekoto, it's okay, but it's not spectacular. So I decided to go into the studio and do our own tests. So we're using a Psyconic 858 for this, and the Psyconic 858 also checks your flash duration. Now, as you can see, the flash duration is actually pretty interesting. It's way higher than Geekoto claims themselves. We did put a call out to Geekoto like, how can this happen? Because I tested the Hensels also with the same light meter and they were spot on, exactly like it was in the brochure. So, or Geekoto on their brochure is a little bit careful with promising too much, or maybe they use the wrong settings because I come out way higher and much more interesting. But there's something else. You also want to make sure that every exposure that you do has the same exposure. Now, what do I mean with this? Especially with speedlights, when the battery gets drained a little bit more, it may very well be possible that you shoot on f5.6 on manual, but there's like half a stop difference or half a stop more, 1/3 less, 1/3 more, and it just fluctuates a little bit. With fresh batteries, okay, but as soon as the battery gets run down, it starts to vary a little bit more. Now, of course, we don't want this because we don't want to correct every image. And remember, colors are 3 coordinates, X, Y, and the big Y, hue, saturation, and luminance. If you change the luminance, you also change the other settings. So, in other words, if your exposure jumps up and down, your colors also look really weird. And what is color accuracy? Let's start with color accuracy itself. Of course, every strobe, every modifier that you use will color your light slightly. So that's why we use in our studio the calibrate color checkers. Now when you shoot a calibrate color checker, you take out all the variables and you're just taking a shot of the light hitting that color checker, and after that you make of course your profile. So you take the whole chain, the coloring of the strobe, the Fresnel in front, your modifier, the air particles, whatever you want to call it, and then the color checker gives you the accurate colors. So it makes sense to use a color checker to create a profile. So I did that, and then we took all the shots we took after each other, and then we compared the three coordinates. And take a look at this. Okay guys, we are in Lightroom, and I took several shots, also of course during the flash duration test, of the color checker and my light meter. Now one strobe is 4 stars, the other strobe is 3 stars. So how do we make sure that we check if all the exposures are equal? Well, very simple. That's why we shot the color checker. So for the first image, I'm going to take my picker. I'm going to make sure that my color balance is right. And as you can see here, 89.8, 89.8, 89.9. So, okay, that's pretty close. And that's of course because we're using the white balance part. I now select everything with 4 stars, because that's my first strobe. I do sync. Take over everything. White balance of course is the most important one. Now let's go for the second strobe. Gonna do the same thing. Take the picker. There we go. 86.9, 86.9, 86.9. Perfect. Let's select them all and press sync. There we go. So now I have 2 sets that should be 100% correct. If the strobe of course does it best. But I have to make one thing very clear before we continue. It's impossible to shoot every image exactly the same and without any difference. Even Hensel strobes or any other brand can't pull that off. You have to make sure that you are incredibly close to be color accurate. Now, what is incredibly close? It's actually what I'm going to show you now. So look at those 3 values, the red, green and blue. So I'm going to place my magnifier over here, and I'll keep concentrating on those numbers. And they shouldn't change, let's say, more than 2 points. So let's start. 90.3, 89.9, that's perfect. 89.9, perfect. 90.2, there we go. 89.9, 89.2. 89.6, 90, 90.1, and as you can see, it's perfect. At the moment I'm only concentrating on the red channel, by the way, but you saw the other ones, they don't change. So that means that every single exposure, let me put it this way, for even the most critical eye, they won't see any difference between the exposures. So let's do it for the other strobe. And let's put it on here. Let's put the magnifier there. So we have 86.8, 0.6, 0.4, 86.4, 86.9, 86.9, 87.5, 87.2. So that's also very, very nice. And without any doubt, I would say that the flash exposure and of course the color stability is absolutely awesome on these strobes. So let's go back to the studio. Now you expect something like this from very expensive strobes, but you don't expect it from something on the lower end of the market in budget wise. And this is the part that really surprised me. I expected much more difference between those settings. In all honesty, they come out very, very well. So the Geekoto 200 and 250s, what do I think of them? I've been working with them now for about a week and pretty intense, and there are a few things that I think are really, really smart. One of the things is the pistol grip. Now, as you can see here, there's a little screw. I can take that out. And of course, this is how you mount them on a studio stand. But if you take it out, you can actually put it underneath here, and it's nicely in the bracket and you don't lose it. And then as soon as you use it as a studio stand again, you can just take it out here, put it in here, put it on a studio strobe. Another thing that I really like about lighting is I want to be able to aim my light. I want to be able to angle the light. Well, with a pistol grip, of course, you can mount something on, for example, a boom stand and use the stand to move. But why not use the pistol grip? So just open this up and just turn it like this. Really nice solution. Now here you guys going like, hey Frank, price-wise, you also know that there's godox on the market, right? Yeah, I know, and it's a great setup, of course. Now the Geekotos are a little bit less expensive than the godox, but the cool thing is, and you can't find this really easily in the manual, and there are some videos online that explain it to you, so when you watch this video, watch very closely. If you own a godox system, on the back there's a plus and a minus. If you press them both together and you wait for a while, there will be a small A inside your display. And everybody that uses a godox remote control or uses a godox system, watch this, it's now compatible with your system. So you can use your remote control, you can use your strobes, and you just add the Geekotos to your setup. And this is a great way, of course, to expand your godox system with slightly cheaper strobes, which perform the same and just look very, very nice. And you can control them with your own remote control. But you can also get the Geekotos, and maybe you like the remote control from godox more, or you like the accessories of godox more. And you can just mix and match. Talking about accessories, one of the things I think you really have to get, of course, are so-called converters. Let me see where I have one over here. Now with the gt250, you get this Bowens adapter. And this is really important when you go outside. So this is the converter. You use it on the strobe. You just tighten it like this and it will sit nicely on the strobe. And now on the front you have this Bowens mount. So now you can get a reflector like this. Just put it in. And there you go. Now the main advantage of a reflector like this is it will bundle the light and give you way more light output. So if you're like me, you want to go outside and you want to kill the sun, yeah, use a reflector like that, and on the lowest possible setting, you can probably already use a lot of power less than on the highest setting without that reflector. So those reflectors really help. But of course, if you have a converter like that, well, you can also mount, for example, your Hansel accessories or your Profoto accessories or whatever strobe you use. Now, if you use more heavy converters, for example, a strip light or a 1.90 m softbox, those huge softboxes, in all honesty, I don't want the system to be mounted on my strobe. So for those, we went on Amazon and we actually bought some of these converters. And you can just mount them on a stand. They're from many different brands. And you can put the strobe in here, tighten it. And as you can see here, I'm using a Hansel to Bowens adapter. So that means I can use all my Hansel accessories, which I absolutely love. They make one of the finest softboxes. And I can use it on the Geekoto system. So if you're in the studio and you already own a Hansel system or an Allingram system or Profoto and you want to use those same accessories, just get one of the converters. If it's a more heavy converter, light shaper, I would highly recommend getting one of those modifiers that you can actually mount on a stand. It just takes the weight off the strobes. So what more to say? I think we're pretty complete. If you look at the tests we did, color accuracy, very, very good. If you look at the flash duration, much better than they actually promised. And also the exposure. Every single exposure is about the same in level. And that's very important. Now, in all honesty, I did push the system pretty hard. So I was pushing on the remote control every time. As soon as I saw the light going green, I immediately pressed. And do remember that that's very important. You see a lot of tests where they wait for 4 or 5 seconds for the strobes to recycle. That's easy. Because if you wait 4 or 5 seconds, the strobe gets a lot of time to recycle, build up its power, and then you get a proper exposure. The problem is when you shoot it right after each other. And let's be honest, that's what happens a lot during a fashion shoot, especially outside. You're shooting a lot of images, you're waiting for the green light, shoot. Waiting for the green light, shoot. And that's how we tested it, on full power, on 1/8 power, and on the lowest setting for the color accuracy. Now in the video we only included the 1/8 for the very simple reason it performed over the whole area just the same. Can I recommend the Geekotos? For the price? 100%, without any doubt. They're great for their price. They're priced slightly below godox, also in the Netherlands. They give you the same performance, they have a nice battery system, they're compatible with godox, so you can easily enhance your system. They have a nice display on the back, the remote control is great, they fit with our Rogue material. You can use your Profoto, Allingram or Hansel system on it. And you can take them easily outside and in the studio. Because there's one thing I did forget to tell you. In the studio, they do have a modeling light. But it's not that bright. So if you work only in the studio and you have a studio like us where we do almost daily shoots and workshops, I still recommend, of course, getting nice studio heads with big modeling lights. But if you're just a hobbyist, Geekoto, I can highly recommend it. And I have some great news for the Dutch customers. Starting next week, you can also buy the Geekotos from us. Now, this wasn't planned. The original plan was that I would use the Geekotos to demonstrate our Rogue system on trade shows, because we can run longer on a battery. So that was the initial plan. Just use the strobes and take some nice images with them and use them as demonstration. In all honesty, you know me guys, I'm very enthusiastic, just like you guys. And when I see something that I really like, we start to think like, hey, can I tell my customers to buy this? And then we found out that Geekoto didn't have any representation in the Netherlands or Europe. And that's the moment when we jumped in. Of course, if you have a product like this and it's priced so friendly and it does so well, I think that belongs to Studio FD, don't you think? So if you're in the Netherlands and you're interested, just give us an email. They blew me away and we started from using them to actually starting selling them. And that doesn't happen a lot. If you have any questions, guys, leave them in the comments below. I'm going to run out and take some pictures. I'm going to fight the sun. See you next time. Bye, guys.